many of the grey races are. I mean, I've made it public. I don't like the Greys. I really don't have time for them. However, there's a lot of humanity in some of them, and many of them are victims. They are trapped themselves, and they'll consistently attempt to undermine what I would call the program. So that's why abductees sometimes report not returning to their bed, or returning with their clothes on back to front, or returning into the front garden, or returning somewhere else. That's not through a mistake. People don't understand. They think that's a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's the Greys deliberately sabotaging the program because they are manipulated by the reptilians, and it's their way of fighting back. I personally witnessed that, and I made that clear in a video some 4 years ago, I think 3 years ago, where I saw a group of humans sitting in a facility underground, and a grey, small grey, 1 metre tall, standing by the side of them, and the grey not taking responsibility for the humans, and attempting to argue. And so often the case will be that somebody, I'll say somebody, a grey can get away with something that appears to be against the instructions of their masters, simply because they are being allowed to get away with it at a local level. It doesn't stop a very grand plan. And in fact, I've talked about the Roswell event, and I've made it clear, in my view, the Roswell event was a planned event to seed technology onto the Earth. You see, the thing is that technically no alien race may give a present to a inferior race. And when I say inferior, I don't mean spiritually, I mean technologically. So if you go back to Earth history, the white man would arrive on some foreign island, and he would give a load of glass beads to the native chief, and the native chief would give him half of his village. That's not allowed.
Right.
So in order to offer those presents, you have to create a situation where in law you can say, well, I didn't give it to them, it crashed, and they took it, and they did with it what they would. So to me, for those who know their history, Roswell was a real event, and it was a Trojan horse. Any race that willingly or foolishly gives up its sovereignty has a lot to answer for. Any race that sells itself because something is offered to it and doesn't have the ability to connect with its higher self and ask, am I being offered something that is good for me? To be offered eternal life, to be offered a body that never breaks down, to be offered wonderful technology, if only you do this. So anything that's got that in its history, I would have a real problem with.
I mean, for example, if I emigrated to Australia and took on Australian citizenship, I could call myself Australian, but I'm still originally Welsh. So in simple terms of what the Akashic would describe as soul origin, in other words, the first place where that soul first came into being, then what we have are 7 races. But in terms of what these races call themselves and how they have spread out throughout various galaxies, then we have something like 50 or 60 potential races, something like that. So as far as I'm concerned, what I do is to stick with soul origin, because it makes life a great deal simpler. So we have we have these 6 non-physical races which essentially are unnamed. But what we have with the semi-physical races are those who have come in contact with people on Earth, and therefore some of them are known to us. So to start with, the one that most people are familiar with is the Greys, or Zetas, or whatever people call them these days. These are the classic aliens of being about 1.2 meters tall, grey skin, large black eyes they appear to have. They don't actually have black eyes. Their eyes are actually yellow with vertical irises. It's just that the home world has very little in the way of natural light, and so when they come into contact with light, they wear sunglasses, for want of a better word to describe them. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but I mean, essentially this is what they wear. And why so many of them have been spotted in deep underground cave systems on Earth is because that's their natural environment. They've been in contact with Earth many times, and have been connected with particularly the American military for a long time, particularly since the Roswell crash. Although there were several of the races actually crashed in Roswell, it was the Greys who made primary contact with particularly the American military. And it is this race that are responsible for many of the so-called human abductions that go on. Much of that is totally overhyped, and there's immense amount of information out there proving that really most of the abductions, or the worst abductions, are actually carried out by the military themselves rather than by the Greys. All the Greys are interested in is studying human physiology, because they see the human body as being much stronger and longer lasting than their own, which they're having a few problems with, and so they're trying to study the physiology to find out whether they can build for themselves a better body, a stronger, more powerful body. So although there are an awful lot of horror stories about these beings, the reality is that they're generally benign, they're generally friendly, and curious more than anything else. The taller ones are essentially a hybrid. They're part of this development program that the Greys have been working on now for certainly several thousand years. And the taller ones seem to be a hybrid between some human genetic structures and the Grey genetic structures. And so it gives them a more powerful body and a greater range of options in terms of how they move around. A lot of abductees talk about biological robots, I suppose would be the best way of describing them. And these really are beings that do not contain a soul. So in other words, they have no consciousness. They are purely and simply like a machine, a biological machine that has been developed by the Greys and another race, who I'll come on to describe in a minute. But also, again, the military has been heavily involved in the development of these biological robots for whatever reason. I mean, it's very difficult to sort of really work through what the military motives are for an awful lot of the things they do. But I mean, the Roswell crash, for example, as I understand it, was caused by the switching on of very similar magnetic force generators that they used on that American ship that they tried in the Second World War. I can't remember the name of it now. Philadelphia, the USS Philadelphia, where they tried using magnetic generators to take the ship off radar, only to discover that the ship disappeared, basically, and most of the crew were killed by this action. So they used similar generators at Roswell to test radar systems and see what it would do. And there would appear to have been a number of ships from different races in the area at the time watching what was going on with this. And as the drive systems of all of these craft are based on electromagnetic forces, then by switching on a massive magnetic field, it literally made the ships fall out of the sky. So, you know, it was a major problem as far as these NTBEs are concerned, but I suppose a triumph as far as the military was concerned.